There she is.
Hi, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Adorian?
I'm doing well. This is my first Instagram Live, so I'm excited. Thanks for
Well,
having me.
yeah, welcome. This has been a fun way to do this. Back during
Yeah,
the pandemic, when we all started using Zoom, I sort of, suddenly saw the opportunity to connect with alumni much more easily and be able to share some of those conversations. So we did them on Zoom, and that had its whole own format. And we eventually put those on YouTube. But being able to hop on Instagram like this and save the recording has been really convenient.
yeah, it's a really neat idea. So
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you for joining us.
thank you. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too, Adorian. We just had, a week ago today, our trip up to Lakeland.
Oh yeah. It's about that time.
Yeah. So that was a good time. I always enjoy hopping on the private plane, and the Jenkins Scholars really enjoyed that this time as well. And of course, Publix does such a nice job of welcoming us up to Lakeland. So yeah, I
Yeah.
always think about all of you around this time of year, especially.
Yeah, and I miss them. Like I was thinking about all the trips that we took with them, and it was great.
Yeah, you should reach out. I bet you they would love to hear from you. And I don't know if you remember John, but he was like legal counsel for them for many years. He's a Duke grad, so you have that in common. Yeah,
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I hope to connect with him too.
yeah. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you've been up to since you left. I mean, I remember our conversations going back to your freshman year, when we were in Rhodes House, I think.
Yeah.
Which, that building's not even there, and a whole new building is in its place at this point. So that's going back quite a few years. But yeah, so I remember kind of where your journey began with us, and I'm excited to see what you're up to now, and I'm looking forward to sharing that story today.
Yeah, a huge change, complete difference.
Yeah. So, and that's actually it's a touch point that I really like to emphasize with students, is sort of the unpredictable nature of our paths and our journeys, and to embrace some of that, because it's so rarely a linear, straightforward, one foot in front of the other, I'll accomplish my goals. That's rarely the story. Usually we
Mhm.
find different diversions along the way. So anyway,
Yeah,
why don't we start chatting about that in your case? And for those of you who don't, those students who will be watching this eventually who don't know who you are, maybe kind of introduce us a little bit about where you're from and how you ended up at UM.
yeah. I'm a Dorian Bradley. For those who don't know, I'm originally from Memphis, Tennessee, born and raised there. And to your question of how I ended up at UM, it's so interesting to like describe that path because it was so serendipitous. Like UM kind of got on my list because an alum from my school, my K through 12 school, but I started going there when I was in sixth grade. But an alum there, she went to the University of Miami, and she was a couple years ahead of me, and she ended up graduating and then going to medical school. And I can't remember if she went to Miller or some other school, but I remember seeing that and thinking, okay, this is a Black woman. This is also someone who's doing something that I wanted to do. I was interested in medicine at the time. So I was like, okay, is probably a good program. I can add it to my list. Um, and then when I was finally a senior and it was time to apply to colleges, I was going to apply to already. And then a, one of my college counselors at my school sent me an email that she had nominated me for the Jenkins Scholarship. And I remember seeing that. She was like, just go ahead and apply. I remember seeing the brochure and being so intimidated because I was like, this is a full cost of attendance scholarship, with benefits. And I saw how many people were admitted every year. And I was just like, yeah, I mean, I'll apply because you put in the work, but I don't have any expectation.
Right.
And I just put it out of sight and out of mind. So, I mean, now, of course, like it worked out. I ended up becoming a Jenkins Scholar, and that for sure, like UM rose to the top of my list at that point. And I was already like, I knew that there would already be resources for me that aligned with my interests. And so it was kind of just a no-brainer that I chose UM. And I studied biomedical engineering at UM. That was also something that I, was already in the mind of doing. I had done like a lot of STEM courses, engineering courses in high school. My mom also had a background in engineering, so we were kind of like guided toward that path. So I studied BME at UM, and then by the time I graduated, I was at that point medicine had kind of dropped off of my path, and so I was looking at other options, and the only other option that I really could conceive of was going to graduate school and specifically getting a PhD. And so I was interested in the PhD, but because I wanted to make sure that it was something that I really could do, I applied to post-bacc programs in STEM. And so I applied to a couple programs and ended up going to the Broad Institute's program in Boston, and stayed there for 2 years. And that was mid-pandemic at that point. And that was an infectious disease lab. I was working on viral diagnostics for COVID at that time. So it was just so fitting, the work that I was doing, and so immediately pressing. And so I really enjoyed that aspect, but I knew after a while in that program that I wasn't interested in a PhD any longer. And so that's why I've pivoted. We can talk about how I decided on the MBA later, but essentially ended up going to graduate school, but for an MBA. So that's where I am now in my first year at Duke, Fuqua School of Business. And it's been a complete learning experience for me, having not been exposed to any of these like types of classes and industries before. So I really enjoyed it.
Cool. So first, I love that you had an experience where you discovered something you didn't want to do, and that was sort of the pivotal move, right? You went and had this experience, and you probably went hoping it would illuminate the path forward towards a PhD, reinforce your interest in that, but it kind of did the opposite. How did that feel when you were sort of discovering that?
I think it was initially really frustrating because I was already kind of on a different path than I expected starting undergrad. Like I wanted to do medicine, and that was the route that I had planned for. Mm-hmm. And then getting to the end of undergrad and knowing that I had to kind of lay something down and decide on something else. And now that something else was no longer working out, it was really frustrating initially. But I think mostly in those times of frustration is where there's a lot of growth. So it forced me to get out of my comfort zone to really explore opportunities beyond STEM, because I felt like maybe it's just not directly in STEM that I need to be in. So I was speaking with a lot of people in the Institute. It started there in the Institute that I worked at. A lot of those people were in public health or epidemiology. So kind of in an adjacent realm to what I was doing, but a little bit more separated. And so that I could get more of a sense of where I wanted to go, but nothing was really clicking still. And I remember just talking to my older sister. I have 3 siblings, but my older sister was explaining to her, I don't know. I feel like I'm just at this very like uncertain, ambiguous point in my life, and I don't even know where to go. And she was like, you should consider an MBA. And at that time, I had no clue what an MBA was. I didn't know how I would fit into a program, an MBA program. But I did my research and stumbled upon some prospective student resources, so conferences and other like virtual programs, and ended up going to an in-person conference for prospective MBA students. And that is where like it clicked. I felt ignited. I felt a passion. I think something that was made mention a couple times when I was there was that so many people in their, starting out in their career or just in general, they want to make a difference in the world. They want to make an impact and help people. Yeah. And they have that intention, but sometimes that intention never fully actualizes into some real sustainable impact. But that is what an MBA program tries to help students accomplish is like giving them the skill set to create more efficient processes, and create real lasting and sustainable impact. And I was like, that is what is speaking to me. Like I've always had this intention of helping people, specifically in medicine, or in STEM, but how to get there, how to facilitate that, didn't have like those tools. So that's pretty much how I landed on the MBA and was excited about the MBA.
Yeah. And so I guess conversely, how did that feel to sort of find a path that you felt committed to and energized by?
Oh yeah, just refreshing, like feeling like there was, I'm not stuck, but there are so many opportunities, and not at all that I was stuck being where I was, because again, there were still so many opportunities within STEM, but I just knew that they didn't fully align with what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
But it felt great to have like fresh, passion and energy about something in a completely different field, a completely different subject area that I even knew I was capable of belonging to.
Mm-hmm. So Adorian, let's back up a little bit to your days. Think back to what that transition to college was like for you, and tell us a little bit about how you kind of got involved. What were you doing in and out of the classroom in college?
Yeah, the transition to college was, I would say, pretty seamless, mostly because of the OAE. I look back and I think I had just that one-stop shop, essentially, where I could go, be pointed in the right direction, and had so much support from you and the entire advising team at the OAE about so many resources, pretty much at my fingertips. Whereas I know a lot of students kind of have to work to navigate that period coming into college. But for me, it felt pretty seamless. And I got involved pretty early. Some of my favorite clubs, I was president of the Hammond Butler Gospel Choir. Really enjoyed that. I was part of that all 4 years. I was also a P100 tour guide, and I loved that. And then was also a student alumni ambassador. So I know some of the events were Dinner with 12 Strangers, I think Charter Day. So like talking about philanthropy and giving after, graduating. So those are really fun, like amazing experiences for me.
Cool. You did a good job in your intro of talking about kind of how you picked your major, biomedical engineering. But I want to kind of zero in on one aspect of that. And I know this is something you and I have talked about, and I've even connected you to some of our current students to talk about this particular challenge, which would be you were pre-med, but also biomedical engineering. Getting to med school on its own is difficult and challenging. And being an engineering student is difficult and challenging. And I always view that path as sort of like the road less traveled. You're picking a tough path to try to get to a difficult goal. How do you assess that? How do you analyze that decision to be pre-med with like a especially challenging major, if that question makes sense?
Yeah, it does. At the time, I didn't see it that way, and I kind of still don't. I do know that like a lot of people are of the mindset that you're pre-med, which is really challenging, and then you're adding like engineering, which is its own very challenging degree, or major. But I saw it as more like I could like find the intersections between medicine and engineering, that especially biomedical engineering. I felt that they were just so intertwined that I could at least like do engineering and apply what I was learning in engineering to pre-med courses and vice versa. I just felt like they were such a great fit that it didn't feel too out of the way to take on both. But I mean, also UM's College of Engineering has it so well set up, like the curriculum for someone who's doing pre-med and biomedical engineering, where like that is like set up with your advisor in the beginning. So again, like I didn't have to try to make classes, pre-med prerequisites fit within my schedule. They were already built in.
Right.
Um, so that was great, but I mean, it's still just very challenging. I think I would have, if I could do it all over again, I would still do it, but it is extremely challenging. But I look at like engineering on its own. I think it would have been challenging for me on its own as well. So, I mean, I'm grateful to have at least been able to do both.
Yeah. How about, you were pretty honest with the assessment of sort of letting go of the idea of a PhD. Back up a little further from that to undergrad, and what was that like for you personally, to kind of let go of the idea of med school? Maybe it wasn't for you. How did you come to that realization, and what did it feel like?
Yeah, so to be honest, my academic performance was not, in my mind, it wasn't great enough to be a competitive applicant for medical school. So I kind of almost felt forced to just lay it down and be more realistic about what what I would decide to do and what my options were. So it was sort of something that I was like, maybe I'll pick this up later, but for now, I'll go in the direction of where I can most likely succeed. I just didn't feel like it was medicine at the time. So it was really, really difficult. I mean, I was even thinking, okay, like if it's that I want to be a provider, and I remember talking to you about this, if it's that I want to be like a provider, healthcare provider, I consider other health professional schools like physician assistant or something along that path. But nothing really made the most sense at the time except for graduate school and a PhD program. And before that, like for me to really make sure that I wanted to do that, a post-bacc program. That's how I came to that decision.
Okay. So I know you were pre-med at the time, but talk a little bit about summers. That's something we talk a lot with students about, and students get a little worried about how they're spending their summers, and they want to make good use of that time. Can you think back to what your summers looked like when you were an undergrad?
Yeah, my summers were mostly like STEM related. Like I did programs at research institutions, so focused on usually biomedical translational research or pre-health professional program. So like I remember doing one at Howard University and then another at the University of Pittsburgh. And both were really great programs. And that's where I think especially the University of Pittsburgh program really prepared me for my post-bacc program. But I wish and this is a tip that I would give to like my undergraduate self, what I would tell myself is to really utilize those summers as opportunities to try new things and look beyond what you've planned for yourself for the 4 years of college. Like I was so stuck in completing my course curriculum like as it was set out and pretty much adding to my resume what was expected. So like for a lot of pre-med students, you have a certain number of research hours or volunteer hours, shadowing hours that you have to get. And I was kind of trying to mold my experiences to match what an ideal candidate would be. And completely like having no idea really that the summers are just like to figure out what I wanted to potentially do beyond STEM, like what is outside of this realm that would also be interesting. And I wish that I would have really like looked into TOPL or utilized the career fairs more for completely different opportunities, because like I'm already doing STEM in class. There are also like experiential learning opportunities that I had in college. So I wish I really would have utilized the summers to do something else.
Branch out a little bit and explore a little more.
Yeah.
So for those who watch this who might be interested in getting an MBA, tell us about that. What's it like?
Oh yeah. Well, I'm finishing up my first year now, and for me it's been like drinking from a water hose in the best way. I took like one business course or one course in the business school in undergrad, and it was healthcare. It was like health sector management. Um, so in terms of economics, accounting, finance, strategy, all of these very core fundamental areas of business I had no exposure to. And so that alone has been super interesting because business, I feel, now that I'm learning more about it, is just so fundamental to every industry, every sector. And it's just great to learn more about that. And then like other aspects of the MBA program, specifically networking with my peers, but also so many people who are senior and have been in their careers for so many years, who are just willing and happy to impart all of their knowledge, and essentially just like try to find connections for so many um, different industries. They call it synergies, but that's also fun, like seeing what opportunities lie for different industries like innovation and technology. All of those things, it's so cool to see it play out in a business setting. So that's really fun. And then I would say the MBA, especially those going or considering a full-time program, which is what I'm in, full-time program, it's just a lot of fun. Like there's so much travel. I can't really even put it fully into words, but it's been a really fun experience.
Is it a 2-year program?
It's a 2-year program. Yeah.
Okay. So how has the experience so far helped reshape your vision for your future? Like what path do you think you'll get on after you complete this degree? Where do you see yourself going?
Yeah, I think I'm still learning so much, and there's so many opportunities, but I came into the MBA wanting to focus on health sector management. So I am in the health sector management program within my MBA, but I've had a lot of I've just grown in a knowledge of so many other sectors like venture capital and sustainability and education and like so many different areas that I'm very curious about. And so I don't know what like my long-term outcome would be. I'm really excited to like figure that out. But right now it's been great to know that, if there are opportunities outside of healthcare that I want to explore, that's within reach. So it's shifted my mindset to not think so like limited and small and thinking that I only have to be in healthcare or in a specific function in healthcare, but that I can kind of work across various functions in healthcare.
So you still healthcare or something medical related will still be part of what you're doing next, most likely. Yeah.
Like for my internship, I will be going into healthcare consulting. So that's just like my top priority and like highest interest. But I do recognize that there are ways to impact healthcare in other areas as well.
Awesome. Good, Dorian. It sounds like I love to hear these stories of people finding their footing. I think back on my own journey sometimes. I try to share that with students sometimes, but sometimes you don't know what you're looking for until you find it, and then the picture starts to take shape, and that's a cool experience to go through.
Yeah.
What before we go, what kind of advice would you give? I mean, you shared a little bit of like, I wish I knew then what I know now, but what else comes to mind for students who are in college and trying to find their way?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and something I would tell my younger self, so current undergrads, is to really network with as many people as possible. And when I say network, I really mean just to talk. So there's none of that pressure, but really talk to people who are doing things different than you, or it could be within or outside of your field or your interests. But I think I was so laser focused on doing STEM that I was only interested in maybe even talking to people who are in STEM and not even considering talking to anyone without like any kind of expectations of having or pressure to feel like I have to have it, you know, all together, that I know everything. So
Mhm.
many people are so willing, I've seen over time that so many people are willing to encourage, you know, early career uh, people earlier in their career, young professionals and students. They're so willing to encourage us, point us in the right direction, and just give insight. And I wish I wasn't so intimidated and feeling like I had this pressure to like impress or know what I was doing,
Mm.
versus just talking and learning, just
Mm.
talking and gaining insight and knowledge. So I would encourage people just to talk to more people, um, really utilize more resources. I look back and I know that I just did not tap into every resource, which happens, but I wish I would like recruit for roles that were not STEM. I guess I mentioned this earlier, but recruit for um, other roles, and with that, with the goal of just gaining certain skills or knowledge and not necessarily going for a certain title or role.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would encourage students to do. And then lastly, something that comes to mind is I wish I had studied abroad. I would encourage I would encourage students to study abroad. Thankfully, I had the opportunity to study abroad in this program. Um, but again, like I was wanting to finish in 4 years, and I had this packed schedule, and I was like, I can't study abroad because I want to get all these requirements done here. But there's so many like I remember there's the +1
Mm-hmm.
scholarship, and then, you know, or just your academic advisors helping you to fit
Yeah.
is in where needed. Like I wish I would have studied abroad. I mean, there's outside of college, and once you start working, there's really not a huge opportunity to do that. So,
Mm.
yeah, those three things.
Good. Those are great. Thank you, Adorian. I appreciate you making time for us. It's been nice texting with you over the last few weeks, and let's stay in touch.
Yes, thank you so much, and have a great rest of your week.
Yeah. Good luck with your last year in the program, and keep me posted on your plans.
All right, I will. Thank you.
Okay. Bye, Dorian.
Bye.